Have you ever just stopped and wondered what actually scares us the most? I mean, what really strips humans down to our bare, primal fight-or-flight instincts? It's a super fascinating question, right? Because when you look back through history, something absolutely wild jumps out at you. We're talking about cultures that were totally geographically isolated from one another, separated by literal oceans and massive mountain ranges. Yet somehow, they created shockingly similar, terrifying creatures to explain the unknown. It's almost like the human brain is just hardwired to project our deepest, darkest anxieties into very specific, horrifying shapes.
So, welcome to this explainer. Today, our goal is to take 24 totally disparate global monsters, pulled straight from ancient mythologies and folklore all around the world, and transform them into this cohesive, really fascinating exploration of human psychology and our shared fears. We're going to break these nightmares down into archetypes, and by doing that, we'll see exactly how our ancestors made sense of all those creepy things that went bump in the night.
Okay, let's dive into this. We've structured our journey today into 5 distinct categories. First up, the wild ape men, then we'll move into human-beast hybrids, scale things way up with colossal giants and cyclopes, brave the spirits of the wild, and finally, plunge straight into demons of the underworld.
All right, let's get started with Section 1, the wild ape men. This first archetype taps into that creeping dread of what might be hiding just out of sight in the deep woods. You know, creatures that are uncomfortably close to being human, but just entirely wild. And it is brilliant to see the global nature of this exact fear. In the deep forests of North America, you've got Bigfoot, described as an ape-like creature standing a massive 2.7 meters tall, which is nearly 9 feet, by the way, and completely covered in dark brown hair. Now jump halfway across the world to the harsh Himalayan mountains in Nepal. The environment changes, and so does the monster. Here we have the Yeti. It's another ape-like creature, but this one is covered in white hair to match the snow. You probably know it as the abominable snowman. Then travel all the way down to the remote outback of Central Australia, and you find the Yowie in their folklore. Large, hairy body, but with a terrifying twist. Very long fangs. It's literally the exact same archetype, just adapted perfectly to blend into 3 completely different, isolated environments.
Now, we really can't talk about this archetype without mentioning a truly terrifying variation from Indonesian folklore, the genderuwo. This guy isn't just some physical beast in the woods, it's a giant, magical monster. Described as a towering creature covered in thick black hair, the genderuwo specifically preys on young women and children. So it takes that hairy humanoid concept and elevates it from a mere wild animal to a predatory, magical threat targeting the absolute most vulnerable. Really scary stuff.
Moving right along, let's look at Section 2, human-beast hybrids.
I want you to consider for a second why merging humans and animals creates such a visceral fear. I mean, it completely blurs the line between human reason and animalistic instinct, right? And we can see how this idea builds across completely different cultures, giving us these vastly different crazy combinations. In Greek mythology, you've got the Minotaur, part human with his massive muscular man's body, but the head and tail of a bull. Over in the mountains and rainforests of the Philippines, there's the Tikbalang, which is a humanoid creature rocking the head and hooves of a horse. Then there's Zhuba Jie from Chinese epic literature. He's an ugly beast, part human, part pig. And what I absolutely love about this one is his highly specific character flaws. He's famous for being lazy, super greedy, and having a major weakness for women, though to be fair to him, he is actually quite a strong fighter. But then, taking a much, much darker turn, native Canadian folklore gives us the Wendigo. This is a malevolent spirit, often depicted as a terrifying human-deer hybrid that specifically possesses weak people. Just totally different vibes across the board.
And right here we have a fascinating same fear, different flavor concept perfectly illustrated. Look, we are all familiar with the traditional werewolf, right? The classic human-wolf hybrid. But over in Ethiopian folklore, they have the were-hyena. It functions exactly like a werewolf, but instead it's a human-hyena hybrid that hunts at night. The mythology simply adapted the ultimate apex predator of their local environment to construct the perfect tailor-made nightmare.
All right, let's scale up the threat level now with Section 3, Colossal Giants and Cyclopes.
So these aren't just things that go bump in the night. No, these are massive, world-altering beings that are designed to make humanity feel incredibly small and powerless. But notice a highly specific, shared trait between these next 2 creatures: the single eye of a Cyclops. Over in Turkic mythology, you have Tepegos. He's a giant creature with a huge body and just one eye smacked squarely on his forehead. Now travel thousands of miles away to the Amazon rainforest in Brazilian folklore, and you meet the Mapinguari. It's also described as a Cyclops, a hairy humanoid, but the Mapinguari adds an incredibly disturbing detail. It has a gaping mouth right on its stomach. No thank you. Now, what's really interesting about this is how we scale up the threat of giants from immediate physical danger to absolute world-ending chaos. We start with the Rakshasa in Hindu mythology. These are cannibalistic giants, literally called man-eaters. They're super fascinating because they're power-seeking deities, but they crucially lack divinity. Then we have Humbaba from ancient Mesopotamian religion. Picture a lion-like giant monster with horns whose entire job is to be the protector of the gods. But then, the scale just explodes. In Norse mythology, you've got the giant Surt. He masters the power of fire, lives in extreme heat, and is actually believed to be the one who will end the world. And finally, the behemoth from the Hebrew Bible, a monstrous creature causing immense chaos. But what makes the behemoth so terrifying is that its appearance has never been described with certainty, because sometimes the absolute most frightening giant is the one you can't even fully picture.
This brings us right into Section 4, Spirits of the Wild. Here, we shift our focus to creatures that embody the unpredictable hostility of nature itself. It's really about the environment pushing back against human intrusion. So in Russian mythology, the Leshy is a deity of the forests. It's incredibly unpredictable because it can literally change its size and height at will, assuming any human or animal form, though, fun fact, it usually picks a deer. Then, in Mori mythology, you have the Patupaiare. These are supernatural beings described as pale-skinned with blonde hair, and they are intensely hostile, particularly to anyone who intrudes on their lands. And then, taking a slightly lighter tone, we have the bugbear from German mythology. Depicted as a goblin with a terrifying face and a hairy body, its main job back in the medieval era was pretty straightforward. It just lurked in the woods purely to scare kids. Literally just a classic parenting tool, mythological style.
And finally, we plunge into Section 5, Demons of the Underworld.
We're going to adopt a slightly darker, more hushed tone here, because this archetype represents our deepest dread, creatures of pure malevolence and death. So the crucial point is how these very specific ancient roots actually birthed universally recognized horrors that we still consume in pop culture today. Take the ghoul, originating in pre-Islamic Arabian mythology. They were said to live in graveyards and literally eat corpses. It's highly likely that this terrifying graveyard dweller was one of the core inspirations for the modern zombies we see in movies today. Beside it, we have the ogre. Deriving from French mythology but now known completely worldwide, an ogre is a legendary, large, hideous, man-like monster. And its most defining, horrifying trait? Yeah, it eats little children. Pure nightmare fuel.
Just notice the sheer variety of underworld demons across these cultures. In Japanese folklore, we have the infamous Oni. These are fierce, evil demons, usually red-skinned, with incredibly scary faces, whose entire purpose is just to provoke fear and distress. Then there's Persian mythology's Ashma. This is a legendary demon representing wrath and fury. And he's not just some foot soldier. No, he is considered the ruler of hell and the originator of the apocalypse itself. But then, contrast that massive cosmic scale with Grendel from English mythology. Grendel is described as a creature of darkness, and the source material describes him in this brilliant way. It says, he's exiled from happiness. Wow, what a chilling, almost tragic way to describe a monster. He's a giant beast, somewhat similar to a werewolf, but it's that literal exile from the light that makes him truly demonic.
We build to our big, dark finale with Orcus from Roman mythology. Now, for those familiar with Greek lore, Orcus is essentially the equivalent of Hades. He is the god of the underworld. But he doesn't just dwell in the shadows. He lives in absolute, utter darkness and actively leads an army of demons. It really represents the ultimate centralization of human fear, right? This coordinated kingdom of the dead just waiting for us in the dark.
Which leaves us with a really provocative thought to end on today. Humanity has always used monsters to explain what we don't understand, whether it's that weird rustling in the dark woods, the chaos of a natural disaster, or just the finality of death. Now, we might not fear what's lurking in the unexplored forests quite as much anymore, but human anxiety definitely hasn't disappeared. So, what modern monsters are we creating today, right now, to explain our current fears? Are they hiding in our technology, in our societies, or perhaps still deep within ourselves? Thank you so much for exploring these archetypes of fear with me today in this explainer. Keep asking questions, and hey, keep looking closely at the shadows.